Hey, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on something you use, well, every single day, but you probably never actually see it. It's called Base64, and honestly, it's one of the invisible, unsung heroes of the internet. By the end of this, I promise you're going to see it everywhere.
Okay, so let's start with a puzzle. I want you to imagine you have this beautiful, super complex photograph, right? It's full of millions of colors, tons of data. Now, how in the world do you send that photo through a system that was only ever built to handle plain, simple text, like just letters and numbers? This isn't some trick question. It's a real, fundamental problem that computers have to solve all the time.
All right, so let's dive right into that dilemma. Because at its heart, the whole issue is really a classic case of two different systems just not speaking the same language.
So on one hand, you've got your binary data. Things like images, audio files, PDFs, basically anything that isn't just plain old text. And on the other hand, you have systems, like say email protocols or certain data formats like JSON, that were built exclusively for text. They don't know how to handle the raw, complex language of binary. So trying to shove one through the other, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. You end up with corrupted, totally garbled data.
And look, this isn't some small niche problem. In the world we live in now, where we're constantly sending attachments, uploading images, and just moving all this complex data around, this incompatibility is a massive roadblock. So, how did we get around it?
Well, we solved it with this incredibly clever, really elegant solution. You can think of it like a universal translator, but for data. So, let's meet the hero of our story, Base64.
Okay, so here's the most important thing to get right off the bat. Base64 is an encoding method. Its one and only job is to take any piece of binary data, I don't care how complex it is, and translate it into a safe, universal, text-only format. A format that any system can understand and transport without, completely messing it up.
And at a high level, the process is actually surprisingly simple. First, Base64 just kind of sucks in the binary file. Then, it converts all that complex data into a long string of text using just 64 pre-approved, totally safe characters. And finally, once it gets to where it's going, the system on the other end just reverses the process. It decodes the text right back into the perfect original file. It's basically a flawless translation service.
So, right about now, you're probably thinking, okay, that's pretty clever, but where does this actually show up in my day-to-day life? And the answer is, well, it's everywhere. It really is. The invisible engine humming along behind so many things you do online.
I mean, this technology is the backbone for a ton of stuff. It was actually first created for sending email attachments, which, by the way, it's still used for today. But now it's also totally fundamental to modern web development, to transferring data between servers, and even for key parts of online security.
Okay, let's talk about a big one, the web itself. Have you ever wondered how a website can show you a little icon or a small image without it seeming like it's loading a separate file? Well, a lot of the time, the answer is Base64. See, developers can actually encode an entire image into a string of text and just embed it right into the website's code using something called a data URI. And the benefits of doing this are actually huge. By embedding images this way, your web browser has to make fewer requests to the server, which can make the page load faster for you. It also just makes life simpler for the developers because all the resources are bundled up into one neat little package. It's a simple trick, but it has a huge impact on performance and efficiency.
Here's another perfect example. Let's say you upload a file to a website. A lot of times, that file gets sent to the server inside a chunk of text, something called a JSON payload, that looks just like this. You see that crazy long, random-looking string next to the word data? That's not garbage. That's an entire PDF document that's been completely translated into Base64 text, all ready to be transported safely. And believe it or not, Base64 also plays a really important supporting role in security. Things like JSON Web Tokens, which are used to keep you logged into websites, or even the digital certificates that make your connection secure. They all use Base64 to package up their data into a text-friendly format. To be clear, it's not the lock itself, but you can think of it as the secure envelope that carries the key.
Now, for as useful as it is, Base64 isn't some magic bullet you can use for every single situation. There are a couple of really important trade-offs and, honestly, some big misconceptions that we need to clear up.
Okay, here's the main trade-off. This whole process of translating binary to text, it isn't perfectly efficient. Base64 encoding actually makes the data bigger by about a third. Now, for a tiny little icon, who cares? It's no big deal. But for, say, a massive high-resolution video file, that 33% increase can be a really significant hit to performance.
And this right here, this is probably the most critical point of this entire explainer, so please listen up. Base64 is encoding, it is not encryption. Let me say that again. Encoding makes data safe for transport. Encryption makes data safe from being read. Anybody, and I mean anybody, can take a Base64 string and instantly decode it back to the original file. So please never, ever, ever use Base64 to try and hide sensitive information. It offers zero security on its own.
So just to wrap up the practical side of things, the good news is that modern browsers have tools built right in to handle Base64, which is awesome for developers. But you always have to remember that performance costs with large files. And if you have a way to transfer the binary data directly, well, that's almost always going to be more efficient. Base64 is really the perfect solution for when text is your only option.
You know, Base64 is just a perfect example of elegant, invisible design. It's a simple solution to a really fundamental problem that just quietly makes our digital world work. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you can see this hidden layer, what other invisible code is out there shaping your digital life, hiding right there in plain sight?